We are doing favors, we are teaching, we are healing, we are strengthening, we're supporting, we are cheering, and yet no one comes and cheers for us. So I'm grateful that we have these television shows and these opportunities to see these stories being written. But when it comes to our own personal lives as Black women, I want us to stop. I want us to quit saving everyone and focus on nurturing and healing ourselves. Welcome, friends, to my space. Let me just get a little situated here and we can get this party started. First of all, I want to say happy Women's History Month. My name is Tendai. I'm so grateful you're here. We're gonna talk about female friendships. Yay, we're all in them, we all love them, we've all been wounded by them, and we're going to talk about all the tea. The lens I'm going to be explaining female friendships or sharing the 2 cents that I've been able to find will be in the lens of psychology, media, television, long distance, and race. This is no way, shape, or form the whole thesis on female friendships. This is just from my own experience and from the media that has informed my experience, my background, and the friendships that I currently have, that I used to have, including some of what I've read. This is not where I'll be discussing everyone's experience. Some stuff will relate to you, some stuff won't. I'm hoping that we can be able to find some common ground as I explore the dynamics of female friendships. I was thinking about how to start in regards to psychology. I read in a journal. This is a journal that was published in October 1993, many years ago, by Lee Ellis and Christopher Peterson, and they were discussing same-sex roles within friendships. And one of the things that I liked was when they mentioned that same-gender friendships tend to be richer, having a possible therapeutic value compared to those of men. Now, this is a no-brainer, to be honest, because we do know that there's more substance when it comes to female friendships as compared to men. And us women are naturally nurturing and are able to just be there for one another. Also talked about how opposite gender best friendships have been described as less fulfilling for women and more fulfilling for men. That was interesting, but also makes sense because I can think of 5 or 6 friendships I've had with the opposite sex where they really weren't as fulfilling, nor were they therapeutic. Yes, they were fun. I was buddies with the people, but there's nothing substance that came out of that friendship or relationship. And so that would make sense, at least according to this journal and from my own personal experience. Now, the first study I'm going to be talking about will reflect on the relationships within females in regards to long distance and how long distance plays into the nurturing and cultivating of these female friendships. I keep mentioning female friendships. I am not drinking out of the red pill cup, okay? Because we all know that is a mess. The first study was discussing how media choice theories and how that impacts the relationships that women have with one another. I think I'll just stick to women and not female. Yeah, we'll do that. It says, like media richness, theory assume that media can be classified according to their richness and that people choose the medium with which fits best to the affordances of a specific task. And so what they're trying to say here is, depending on the types of technology that are available, there are certain ways that people can choose or prefer to use in trying to cultivate friendships with one another. And so I'll give an example. Back in the day, I used to have pen pals, and if you don't know what a pen pal is, it's when you would find a friend, whether through a school program or I don't know, it just depended where you would find these like relationships, but you would always have to have somebody that you can write to, somebody you can talk to. And this was usually through sending each other letters, which in my opinion, I feel is a dying art form, okay? I still write letters, by the way, but I'm just saying. And so what would happen is you would get to know somebody, the only mode of communication you had with that person would be through writing letters, thus pen pal. So right now in the world what we live in, we have phones, we have email, we have text, we have WhatsApp, we have social media platforms we use to our advantage to be able to communicate with people. Now, in this study, they kind of showed a difference between phone text messages and email. For phone, it did mention that when you are communicating with someone through the phone, you have a richer medium which allows for expressing one's emotion and opportunity to receive and give feedback. This is more instantaneous. You get that feedback instantly. You're able to communicate back and forth, back and forth. And the difference when it comes to email is, though it is an independent of space and time, some prefer email because it is easier to communicate across different work schedules and time zones. Now, I want to take a pause on this because I feel that is in my wheelhouse. As most of you know, I am someone who has made friends all over the world, made friends in each of these individual countries, and those friendships are important for me. These women, wonderful women. And so I will find that with other friends, we can easily communicate through FaceTime, through WhatsApp, through emails. And with the others, I can easily just send a long email of whatever it is I'm thinking, and they can respond if and when they have time, regardless of like time constraint. They're still able to give me clarity, and I'm able to receive the guidance and or just satisfaction of receiving something from a friend. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I really liked how this study was giving the importance of media use within long distance friendships. Now, because I've been blessed to live in other countries, the female friendships I've made have allowed me to have a friendship where we can email back and forth, even now, which I think is brilliant because with some people, they do not have the same time zone as me. And so this brings an advantage where we can use emails and have our work schedules intertwine or not, but still be able to maintain that friendship, if that makes sense. Conclusion of the long distance friendship does say the closer the friendships, the more emails written in total, but there's less of the reactive relative use of the email. However, there's a percentage of phone calls that increase with those friendships that email back and forth, which I thought was interesting because I guess you would want to hear more in real time, and then you can thus schedule that with that particular individual. The second study delves into more of the context of phone calls. It says that the intimateness of emails does not change with increased closeness of the friendship. The intimateness of the phone calls increase with the closeness of the friendship, which obviously makes sense. The more close you are with that person, the more you will phone each other. And the results indicates that people who use email primarily for staying in touch, whereas important personal matters are still discussed on the phone. So that's what I was saying earlier, where you can both have that same real-time relationship, but if there is something in addition to what couldn't be discussed in the phone call or cannot be discussed in the phone call, can be explained in the email or through text. Either way, I think each friendship brings its own different kind of mode of communication. Because I've noticed I have some friends where we will just send memes to each other consistently, and that's us communicating through those memes, depending on what is the topic of that meme, of that video, of TikTok or Instagram. And then with other friends, I'm sending voice messages back and forth, and we're still having that same enriching relationship, but it is more in real time, as in we're sending voicemails, not mirroring whatever message we're getting on whatever social media platform. But that is also can be the same thing when it is a friend where you can have all these mediums of communication, but there being one primary one where you're consistently talking back and forth. I hope that makes sense. But now I'm getting to the fun part, which is female friendships within television and media. We all know there are so many examples of female friendships within television and media. I decided to pick ones that apply to me and the experiences I've had, but also the ones that the general public has been able to have more thoughts and opinions on. So if you already know, Insecure, Issa and Molly, Oprah and Gail, and Rachel and Monica from Friends, Gilmore Girls, Lorelai and Rory, Grace and Frankie, and so many more. I'm going to obviously only focus on Black women because that is my experience, right? I will delve into more of the nuances between white and a Black woman and the friendships that they can have and what that can look like. But for now, I'm going to focus on Issa and Molly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a video I found on TikTok from a really awesome creator. And she gives the lens of Molly and how her relationship with Issa was so comfortable and so great, but it got to the point where neither one could be really open with the other. And there was just so much buildup of things happening in that relationship that when push came to shove, everything kind of blew up because neither was wanting to really communicate. And that is not to say that was like the entire season of the show. It was more of different phases in each of the women's lives, like when Issa was still struggling, and then when Molly was struggling, and then how that played into part with their relationship, but also how it affected everyone around them.
I'm really sorry you saw that. That wasn't meant for you.
Yeah, no shit.
Okay, but that's the way I've been feeling. And this whole thing feels so forced.
I was trying to get us back to where we were, but I didn't realize it was so hard for you to be around me. And you say you're trying, but it feels like I'm the only one who's putting in any effort.
By inviting me to brunch and playing old drinking games, girl, we haven't even talked about what's really going on.
Because I didn't know you wanted to talk about it. But okay, let's talk about the block party then.
This is bigger than that. We have been off for months.
Yeah, I know. That's why I reached out. But I can't be the only one who wants to make this work, Molly.
Watch what she says.
Maybe who you are now and who I am now just don't fit anymore.
Ouch. Ouch. Issa is about to respond and say,
Okay.
Surprised by her response.
I mean, there really isn't much more to say.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a great example as to why your behaviors do not necessarily dictate what kind of attachment style you have. It's really about your mindset. Now, you're probably wondering, how is an anxious person and another anxious person, how are they not able to reconnect pretty quickly? Isn't that their whole thing? They're trying to reconnect, they're trying to solve conflict together? And the simple answer is yes, but humans are complicated. Molly and Issa are both anxious, but what's different about this situation, and the reason why Molly is distancing herself and not trying to reconnect with Issa, as you would probably expect an anxious person to do, she's actually almost finding ways to belittle Issa, belittle their friendship. Almost just say, well, you know what, we're just not connecting anymore because we're just not that close anymore. But as you can see with her reactions, what's really going on for her, and we see this in the show, is that she feels deeply hurt by Issa. Something happened in their past, or maybe it was multiple things that happened that made her feel so hurt and abandoned by her friend. Now, instead of revealing those feelings to Issa, She instead is holding back. She's withholding, right? And that's what happens when you have a lot of pride. It also happens when you have a lot of unresolved feelings that you can't process on your own. So instead of trying to resolve these issues, the pain is so heavy, she rather just keep it where it is, deep down there, right? In a lot of ways, she wants Issa to fight for their friendship. She feels that Issa is the one who heard it in the first place, but she doesn't know how to navigate that kind of conversation. On one hand, she holds her accountable, but she doesn't explain why, which is what is bringing up all the resentment on Issa's side, and also at the very end, this sort of, okay, fine, you don't think we can be friends, or you don't think there's a reason for us to figure this out? I'm out, which does surprise Molly. Now, when you have an insecure attachment style, doesn't matter if you're avoidant, doesn't matter if you're anxious, you do struggle with expressing your honest feelings and really being vulnerable with the person that has, especially the person that has hurt you. So when you are anxious, you have a stronger, let's say, reason to follow someone who has run away from you, because maybe the fault isn't within you. But I know what you're thinking. How is it that two anxious people aren't able to come to a happy resolution? Isn't that their whole thing? They're anxious, then they want to make sure the connection is still there. I would say the simple answer is yes, but attachment styles are very nuanced, or maybe too simplistic when you bring in real people and real complex personalities into the mix. Just because you're anxious does not mean you will always be looking to seek for reconnection or resolution, especially if you're anxious and you are with another anxious person. They will bring out different kinds of behaviors in you than, let's say, an avoidant partner would, okay? Now, what's really interesting here is that Molly is showing avoidant tendencies, and it really does confuse people, because when we see people being avoidant, we assume that they are an avoidant person, that their attachment style is avoidance, but that's not entirely true. We all have anxiety, we all have avoidant tendencies. It's really about what our mindset is, not about what our behaviors indicate, right? So if Molly looks to be avoidant, it's mostly because of what is happening internally with her, and also the fact that she is, sort of like contending with another anxious person. Issa seems to be leaning in towards her, trying to resolve the conflict, but for whatever reason, Molly feels probably overwhelmed by the amount of pain that she has gone through in that relationship. On some level, she probably does want to hold Issa accountable without telling her why she's holding her accountable. So for those of you who are anxious, you probably have received the silent treatment from people. People have been withholding from you, and they will never explain to you why. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't really fully understand their emotions, or they're not ready to reveal them because they're too painful. When you have a lot of pride, you're not necessarily looking to be vulnerable, especially with the person that hurt you. So instead, you make it seem like, well, it's your problem, or it's a problem that no one can resolve, and I am just okay with sitting in this in-between space. But as you'll notice, because Molly is more anxious, when Issa does actually agree, maybe we aren't friends anymore, and maybe it just is what it is, Molly is actually even more hurt and even more surprised by that sort of agreement, right? And so it goes to show that there is a lot of anxiety there. She is navigating some insecure feelings, but she, unlike an avoidant person, is sort of on the edge of, well, I want this to still work, but I just don't know how to have that conversation. While as someone who's avoidant will be very firm in just not wanting to have any kind of relationship or completely disconnect and seemingly walk away like there's no issue, right? But Molly clearly has one. So again, if you are anxious, you have probably seen yourself do this in relationships likely with other anxious people who are coming after you and saying, hey, what's going on? What's happening with us? I feel like there's a shift. And if you don't feel safe enough to express what it is that you feel in the relationship or what they've done to you in that relationship, you can come from a place of being a little bit egoistic. Oh yeah, you want to come to me now and you want to resolve things? Well, there's nothing to resolve.
Friendship that I want to touch on is from the show Girlfriends, between Joan and Toni. This was a toxic relationship, or it became toxic as, the show carried on. There was this lack of empathy and narcissistic tendencies, jealousy, where, either one was being judgmental towards the other, and lack of boundaries. There's this wonderful video, again, from a TikToker, Jessica Write the Script. She was able to kind of explain these relationships and this friendship between
Toni and Joan's toxic friendship, girlfriends. Now, we all know that Toni and Joan grew up together. They had been best friends since I think the 4th or 5th grade, and they both had different upbringings. Joan had more privilege and was able to kind of, pretty much get whatever she wanted, whereas Toni came from humble beginnings and she had to really work for what she had. Her parents were farmers and they weren't able to afford the latest things. And as a result, Toni and Joan became two totally different people. Toni became very materialistic and Joan became more just humble, but she also became a people pleaser, which was very toxic within their friendship. And when it got to the point to where they had issues within their friendship and they had squabbles and they would bicker, Toni would take it way too far. Who remembers that episode in either season 1 or season 2 when Toni literally tries to sleep with Joan's boyfriend on purpose to get back at her? And it's like, dang, you couldn't have communicated with her. You took it there. And that says a lot. And to be honest with you, at that moment, Joan should have cut her off right then, because those are lines that you just don't cross. And it got to the point where, everyone gave Toni all this grace, but yet they expected so much more out of Joan, and yet there was no room for error with Joan. Toni could do all these things, and people were like, well, we know how Toni is. That's just how she is. But they would unfairly hold Joan to this high standard. And it's like, no, that's not even right. If you're going to hold me to this high standard, Toni should be held to this high standard too. And it's almost like they were really saying that Toni was allowed to be selfish and borderline narcissistic, whereas Joan had to always be the bigger person and take the high road and turn the other cheek. And one-sided friendships like that, they are extremely toxic and they will leave you feeling bitterness, resentment, and it'll almost get to the point to where you no longer have your own voice within the friendship because you're not even worrying about you anymore. You're worrying about everyone around you, but are they giving you that same energy? And this is literally screenwriting gold, because so many people go through this in their friendships and they don't even realize how toxic it is. They are just holding on to the friendship because they've known each other since childhood.
All of these videos are just a little bit of a insight of how female friendships work within television and media, especially amongst Black women. There's definitely a difference compared to, like, Rachel and Monica, or Rory and her mom. There's these nuances that only can be seen within the Black women friendships. I will say, in my own experience, the most fulfilling friendships, or at least where I felt more grounded and where I could be myself, have been with my Black friends. And it is naturally because we have a shorthand. We have the same experiences, or we can understand each other's experiences. We know where they're coming from. We know what they're rooted in. And so when I'm talking to my Black friends, I don't have to over explain myself. I don't have to make things any clearer apart from the foundation of knowing that, I get you. I know what you're going through. I understand. The difference is with my white friends, there is no shorthand, and there's more of I have to explain where I'm coming from. I have to explain where I'm going with whatever I'm experiencing. And so the friendship is very much can be fulfilling, but it's not the same as my friendships with my Black friends. While we're still on television and media, I want us to kind of take a dive into the Black best friend trope we see in media. I couldn't talk about this without having a little section where I can highlight that. And you'll see it all over the screen. There's been so many, the Black best friend trope, friendships amongst women that we have seen in media. We have Kerry Washington when she was the best friend to Meg Ryan's character, Stacey Dash in Clueless. We have Gabrielle Union in 10 Things I Hate About You. She's all that. We have Elise Neal in Scream 2. We have Jada Pinkett Smith. We have Viola Davis in Eat, Pray, Love, where she's the best friend of Julia Roberts' character. We have Nia Long. We have Alicia Keys in The Nanny Diaries, and Jennifer Hudson in Sex and the City. And you know what disappointed me is that there's a long list.
You're not ashamed of yourself.
And I'm not going to get into too much in regards to the Black best friend trope. I'm just going to share a little bit from an article I was reading on this blog post by Alexis. I encourage people to go and search that article, blog post. She is pretty much highlighting the Black best friend. So she talks about how the token Black friend or Black bestie is something that, the media uses all the time and pushes in our faces. This woman acts as the support system to the white protagonist. She's the person you call when you are sad, your sassy protector, and your rock to lean on. Now, there's nothing wrong with being there for your friends. There's nothing wrong with wanting to support your friends. However, the narrative in these television shows and or movies is always the white protagonist is being saved by the Black best friend. So it's almost like the Black best friend doesn't have someone coming to save her, someone to support her. They're constantly pouring into this white protagonist. They're constantly being there for them. They're the epitome of the stereotypes. They're sassy, they're quick-witted, all of these things. And it's, to be honest, for us Black women, it's draining. We're tired. And I personally have found myself in those situations where I realized that I was that Black bestie that would run to the aid of the white protagonist, that would always be there to save you and all of those things. So it is really hard to have female friendships within the interracial lens because of those stereotypes tending to creep in every so often. We see that even through history, when Black women would be, obviously through slavery, seen as the mammy type, were always there to save, help, explain things. And now, even with the social justice issues that go on, we are looked at to be the ones to explain why racism is happening, all these bad things happening, because we should have the answers. And yet it's actually, no, we are the ones experiencing the injustice. So therefore, I can't give you any answers, nor can I explain to you why you have your people doing the things that they do. So I think 2020 was a big revelation for most Black people, because that's where we realized that, oh, not all of the white friends that we have are allies or are there for us or care about us. And this was unfortunately because of the death and murder of George Floyd, where we as a Black collective realize that, yeah, we can be friends, we can kiki, but at the end of the day, who do you really support? Who are you really there for? That's just scary, to be honest. And another thing as well is when Black women are seen as the pets, and this is now in the workplace, I won't even start that conversation because we would be here all day. We are doing favors, we are teaching, we are healing, we are strengthening, we're supporting, we are cheering, and yet no one comes and cheers for us. I'm grateful that we have these television shows and these opportunities to see these stories being written. But when it comes to our own personal lives as Black women, I want us to stop. I want us to quit saving everyone and focus on nurturing and healing ourselves or amongst each other, because that is where our true unity lies. That is where our power is. But back to female friendships, I want to be able to highlight a little bit more about how us Black women nurture each other, because it is positive. Okay, we might be experiencing this, that, and the other out there, but when we are together and we are breaking bread, we definitely do heal and nurture one another. And that's kind of what I want to end with, to just shed the light on how myself as a Black woman, I was raised by Black women who nurtured and affirmed me and helped me to feel loved and seen and to have an identity rooted in the sense that I am special, I am beautiful, I am loved, I have something to contribute. One of my favorite quotes is by Nina Simone when she said, "You will use up everything you got trying to give everybody what they want." I'm not even going to dissect it. It is self-explanatory in regards to Black women and how we tend to show up in the world and who we're showing up for. But also, we need to remember, show up for yourself, you know? And there's a connection and resolution that has to be found when we are doing the work of showing up for yourself, finding your identity. My mom always poured into me. Like, she would give me words of affirmation. She educated me, she strengthened me, she made me realize that no one can tell me otherwise, because I am coming from amazing, brilliant women, from my grandmother, my great great grandmother, etc., my aunts. So I was very fortunate in that respect. And when I moved to the US, it was very hard for me because as a nation, you don't really feel affirmed because you're the minority. You don't feel, affirmed. However, I found community within, being around other Black people in the US and finding my identity, being loved and seen. And so I think the only thing I feel is the way to reconnect with who you are within our female friendships is to affirm one another. It's to critique one another, right? Because we can't just be drinking the same Kool-Aid and not giving each other constructive criticism, or just calling each other out, or better yet, calling each other in. I like that term. Calling each other in and just be like, hey, girl, this and that. And we move on, we nurture, we progress. Because what I notice is with some friendships, you really can't be the only one doing the work. And what I mean by that is you can't be the only one calling, texting, messaging, nudging them every so often to say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, is there anything I can do for you? If you find yourself being the only one who's consistently doing those things, you are in a relationship with yourself. You're on your own. You are on your own. Stop that. Especially if you're a Black woman. Walk away swiftly, please, to the left. Okay? You don't need that in your life, because you're the only one who's working. You're the only one who's doing the work in that relationship. And with friendships, I think it's even more important to put in the work, because all of us like to put in the work when it's a romantic relationship. We will do everything, honey. We will go to therapy for that person. We will do couples counseling. We will do it all. But in our female friendships, we choose to not fight for them. We choose to not do anything. We just wait for the other to do something. And I say, no. Simone said, you will use up everything you got trying to give everybody what they want. Stop that. And I will do the same, because I have seen myself overexerting and being there for this, that, and the other. And then I'm left depleted, empty, and feeling like I'm alone. And yet I have all these people around me. But it's because it was one-sided. I was the one doing all the work. And that's not always, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of what that can look like. Before I leave, I wanted to read a little bit of an excerpt from the book I'm currently reading by James Baldwin, my favorite author. Nobody Knows My Name. He says, in the first few pages, nothing is more desirable than to be released from an affliction, but nothing is more frightening than to be divested of a crutch. It turned out that the question of who I was not solved because I had removed myself from the social forces which menaced me anyway. These forces had become interior, and I had dragged them across the ocean with me. The question of who I was had at last become a personal question, and the answer was to be found in me. This applies to me personally because I have moved across the oceans, but the one person I've always been with is myself. And I cannot allow myself to be dragged into becoming a crutch, a diversity crutch of someone, or becoming someone something, because I deeply belong to myself. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to nurture the relationships I have around me, but I'm only going to nurture the ones that are also coming from people who want the same things. And so my word for you as you go in this week is reset. Reset. Assess, reconnect, resolve, or just burn it all down, honey, and just reset. If the friendship is worth it and it's worth saving, and there's an apology that's needed, and hopefully that apology is coming with changed behavior, then both parties have to make it work. Because if there's no that, then what are we doing, right? Anyway, I hope you love this video. I hope you like. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you stick around. Please share your 2 cents in the comments. And I don't want 100 cents, okay? 2 cents. Share your experiences or something that you've liked in the video, that you loved. People online are so good at providing nuance and different perspectives, which is what I love about the internet. So from this millennial to you, have a wonderful week. See you in the next one.